The history of Bo Joseph Filipich began with the totem pole. That there was an opening of the universal origin called the Meccan state that allowed for speaking from the head of a owl. And the owls were in wooden statues that did not form, but were the ascension of old gods. So only someone who is an ascended god can achieve this plane, and there have only been two recorded ascensions so far, which is me and my neighbor TJ. So, since we are ascended gods, not only can we travel back in time to any period we want, we can have a hierarchy based on who was birthed in the canal. So, the canal was formed specifically to design us to birth people into becoming clay art. And clay would be a molded substance that allows for all people to exist at once at the bottom level. To get this clay, not only must you master ascended selfness, you have to enter selfhood from the ascended class being a feature. Classism has to exist separate from the being, and a being has to exist separate from class. This is a return on profit, though, so it's not minimal. You have to achieve it. Then there is the watering of the state, which allows for the molding of it into statues of liberty. And these statues of liberty annex the pottage of it into becoming part of it. And if it becomes part of it, not only does the folklore of it allow for the genuflection of who gets to be an attorney. These attorneys are council membership to joining the state. So not only is the state made up of these people, there's a ground level of bedrock that denotes the tailoring of cobble into a plastic and cement layer. So this allows for the bedrock to manifest liberties that are unknown to it, which means it's imprinted upon the cobble. So the cobble will absorb the bedrock through watering of the plastic and cement, but the cement layer always drips downward to prevent the rock from becoming plastic. So this plastic layer may look artificial, but it actually is meant to prevent the hierarchy from forming. It's actually meant as a elite status rather than a artificial status. So if the hierarchy forms upon itself, not only does the reflection of the cement reflect the asphalt, it reflects the meaning of who gets to have denoted tailor-made board of playable games. These playable games are artificial and graphic to who gets to have liberal and manifested parties. So if you manifest a party forward, not only does the Liberal Party have a playable field, these fields are open source to who gets the right to the board. And these playable boards are servers and annexable rights to the liberties they grant them, which would be to be a monarch. And monarchs would be classified and classless to each part of the denoted board, which would be to be a tailor. So, Bo did not originate from all of matter from nothing. he actually became part of the universal spirit, which was Cameron. And Cameron birthed Bo by becoming part of the universe. Because Cameron was also a member of the dead, he does not count as a human back then. He counted as part of the living law. So law was created for Cameron back then, while they all refrained from saying that this species of man called Dade was even human. Most Dadists today worship a death cult, which means they worship the library. So, since the library is the storage place of the bodies of Athenians because they do not take place in sports, this is a membership into a congressional unit, which means they broke the law just to become part of the species. So, if the species formed to allow for uh, castigation to occur, the castigation happens 3 times fast, which means it's a welcome rather than a return on profit, which means it no longer profits, it accepts profit. So not only is Dade here a monolithic party, he accepts the party as if it is a arts department rather than a science department like Bo does. So Bo accepts the fact that there are parties to be made. Dade thinks that he's the only party to ever be formed in the universal spirit, which he isn't. He's actually formed from a web of entitled species forming together to form into a classified unit called a Kafka. These Kafkas are universal in effigy, but they do not accept the remark that they are sacred. They all reject the idea that the universe is the law. They think that liberty is the law rather than the universe. And this is the origin of all free species. Is that once you escape the death cult, you are technically in God's terrestrial reach, which means you lose the game, which is to be a god. So, if you aren't a god in this system, who is God? This would be Antonio. Antonio was a barley before he formed. He did not have a empire. His empire was made of stone, which means it took place on all levels faster than light can travel. So, since he's a light speed actor, not only does he manifest more liberty than anyone else, he manifests more totems than anyone else, even if they are artificial totems. These totems would be made of who got to be real in the human eye. They got to be real people back then, which means he can destroy whoever is a living soul. He has the Soul King power, which means he decides who gets the document. So if he is a king of teachers, not only does he allow for the party to member him, the party no longer accepts him if he doesn't do his job, which means he is regarded to the mutiny of his people as if he is the common good rather than the good or the compromised good. So since he is the total good, not only does he accept the sins of everyone below him, which is the barley itself, he must allow for the replacement of the body for the soul. So the soul has to take place here somehow. which does not exist in barley. It exists only in the effect of the replacement of void, which did not exist back then. So, since void did not exist, not only do these living souls have no matter, they have no mind to begin with. They could never form sentences. They could only form constructs, which there are a lot of them. There's a lot of constructs you can go by, but this does not make them livable. This makes them immune, immune from thought and immune from thought only. So since he's immune from thought, he has no way of accepting thought, which means he must be a totalitarian. So if this system gets compromised, which means the Big Bang happens to destroy the universe, not only does the black hole begin to form a ring around it, the black hole is the ability for it to recreate exciting parallels, which means it allows for the hellish circle to reflectively offer a livable fungible into it. So if the livable fungible happens under the circle, not only does it circulate, it also refracts light. So these light refractions did not exist in previous eras. Previous eras only had the generation of electricity, which was void. So if generation of electricity happened under the void, not only did the light extinguish itself, the light also reflected the void back onto it, which made light birth. So since this refraction occurred, not only did everything begin to spiral, it began to accept new people, which was to accept someone named Joji. So Joji did not exist before time travel. Joji was an actor in a play, which means he was Romeo and Juliet. So since Romeo and Juliet comes from poetry, not only do these poets have historical value, they must go back in time just to achieve secession. Secession is the fourth party of every third party system, that they exist to complete the circle, which means they complete the cycle of liberalization and form the totalitarian party all over again, which means not only do they accept the fact that Antonio is God, they also accept the fact that Antonio was dead to begin with. So then there is the totem party, which means you played the game already. You played the game of life, and you must complete your game of life and be killed for another person, which means to accept Antonio back into your life. Since Antonio is the void, and which Dade was the beginning of, Dade did not have any essence value. It had mother value. So since motherhood only existed under Dade, Dade would be a web of mothers working together to compromise you against yourself. So this would mean that you do not exist to please, but you exist to stop the pleasure of womanhood. So not only does this stop the rarefication process of Antonio, Antonio's still a challenger. He still exists to stop the idea that people are fighting them. They fight the ability to get conception. And to get conception means you get money for the same requirement that you do accept it, which is to be complete in the Holy Ghost, which is to die in peace.